Welcome, everybody. I'm Mark Orttung, CEO of Projectworks. Welcome to the Projectworks podcast, which we were calling Z Suite last year. So, 2026, we got a new name and I've got a new co-host. I'm really excited to introduce Dominique Rennell. And maybe I'll turn over to you, Dominique, to give a little
What?
introduction.
Yeah, hi everybody. So as I said, good morning to those in New Zealand. Good evening to those in the UK. Hi, I know we've got a bunch of people spread across the globe, so that's super cool. My name is Dominique Rennell. I am the Chief Customer Officer here at Projectworks. A little bit of an intro to me. I've spent my career across sales and customer leadership. And I think that experience has really shaped how I look at the value delivered. And I'm always really focused on sustainable growth. I'm also really proud to currently sit on the board at Silverstripe, which is a successful NZ consultancy, digital solutions. And I've mainly spent most of my career in consulting and professional services firm, which is pretty handy, for today. And I've often found myself helping firms scale beyond that sort of founder-led hustle stage. And it's in this experience that I've really seen, I think, firsthand what separates firms who are just find themselves busy at times through to those that are really, really genuinely built to last. I really love being on winning teams. Who doesn't? And I really love bringing sales and delivery and leadership together. I'm all about really clear goals and real outcomes. And I'm very excited to be on the first podcast of the year. And we're here today with the topic, is your firm actually worth buying? And I think that's a question that leaders across all organisations should be asking sooner rather than later. I think a poll has just come up. I can see that. So why don't we kick it off by asking people on this call, what do you think your ideal timeline is for an exit? I can see that's come up. Mark, can you see that as well?
Yep, I've got that. I'm really
Yeah.
curious to see what we get back. If
Would like to
people
see
are,
how many people list yesterday, as in they're super keen to be doing that. I can see, okay, results. Okay, interesting. Most people on the call are going further on. So 3 to 5 years or even 5 to 10 years, uh, which is a pretty good result because I think we'd
yeah.
agree that you need a bit of runway. Need a bit of runway to get there. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Yeah, I think we'll talk a lot about that actually. Yeah, I think with Nexient, where I helped architect an exit, I think it took me probably 6 years from the first time I started engaging with outside potential buyers and bankers to when we actually did a deal.
Yeah.
And I learned a ton. We'll get into some of that, but yeah,
Done yet?
it
6 years sort of on the road, or like going down that journey to figure that out.
6 year overnight success, right? It's one of those
They
like
say.
it looks like you did it quickly at the end, but usually there's a ton of work before that.
Yeah, and you're right. That is really what we want to dig in today. What is that ton of work? What should you be focusing on? The summary of what we're going to be covering today is we really want this session to be for leaders who are looking to plan an exit and essentially for anyone who's really trying to build at scale. Mark and I have been playing around with a bit of a maturity model that we would really like to share, really looking at how a consultancy and a firm goes across. If you think about potentially that 6 year journey, what are the metrics that matter? What should you be focusing on? How do you build sustainably? I think lots of leaders are often focused on growth. Let's win new deals and see that growth coming in, but that can come in different shapes and forms, especially for consultancies, I think, which can have real highs and lows and peaks. So we will be digging into that maturity model, riffing a bit on that. But actually, Mark, I've got a few questions for you. You've already alluded to it a little bit. I obviously have the benefit of knowing you well and knowing your background, and you've already segued into it. But I know that you've been through a couple of exits. So do you want to start with a couple of touch on that, couple of stories there for us?
Yeah, I feel very fortunate. Well, my friends say you have a problem every time I join a new startup. This is startup number 6 for me in my career. And the first five, four of them had an exit.
Yep.
So I feel very lucky to have
Yeah,
been
that's
a part of
awesome.
that. Um, and the one that I really was in the leadership seat for was Nexient, which was a US software development consultancy. And I was kind of brought in with the goal of architecting an exit. It
Yeah.
was funded by a venture capitalist. So from the beginning, that was kind of the idea.
Right.
I didn't realize how hard it was till I got in and started trying to really figure it out. Um, One of the things that I learned, and I think is sort of key to this, is you can't shoot for an exit. You have to shoot for building a great company. And if you do that, lots of options will be available to you. But if you shoot for an exit and miss, then you're kind of in a bad spot. But
Yeah.
if you sort of build out like what is a great company and you shoot for that and you miss by a little bit, you probably still have a great company or a really good company. And then you just the better you build out the company, the more options become available in terms of exits
That is
or investments.
an interesting point because I think there's almost two things going on there, right? Often when people say, and again, I've been in that role before. I've come in as a sales leader, and people said, "This is where we want to be in 2 years, 3 years." So then that does change the sales plan or what you're looking in terms of growth across the client base, or you know, recurring revenue across different customer bases. But I think sometimes people often ask, well, what are the metrics that make a great company? Like, how do you know
Yeah.
what that is? And I guess that's it. Even like, who would want to buy you in the first place? How do you know what metrics are going to matter to them? So I guess what you're saying is, rather than putting all your eggs in that basket, if you just really focus on the metrics that make a great company, um,
Yeah,
then at the very worst, you're left with a fantastic, successful company at the end of the
right.
6 years. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a little contradictory to my other advice, which is you got to be working on this the whole time and like trying to figure it out. But at least for me, I did not know about how investment banking worked or how strategic acquisitions are put together. So for me, as early as 2016, I ran Nexian from 2014 and we sold it in 2021. As
Yeah.
early as 2016, I had external interest. So I would with no banker, I would just have meetings with, so that, think of like the top 10 consultancies would reach out and say, we'd like to buy you. We'd like to have
Yeah.
some meetings about it. And we had our financials were going the wrong way. We were not profitable. We were shrinking. Like we had no business even entertaining the conversation at all, but we did it anyway. And every time we did it, I learned a ton about sort of, okay, I can see we're falling down here and we're falling
Yeah.
down here, right? And we go work on that. So the
And that is
next
just
time,
almost what they were interrogating you on. It's like, I wish
yeah.
I had a better answer. Why were they calling you then, Mark? If you
I have
think
no
you
idea, to be honest. I mean, I think we stood out because we were the trend at the time was everybody in the US was moving IT to India and had pretty
were,
much done so by 2015. And we were coming in with a counter thesis, which is there's got to be some part of your portfolio of people in the market who know what you're trying to do
yeah,
and they'll
right.
build better software. So we were kind of going across like against the stream of what everybody else was doing. So we probably looked interesting.
Yeah,
And nobody could see our financials till they dug in.
yeah,
So they thought we were growing
yeah,
until,
sure. And then they came into it. And I
yeah,
think that's a piece. I'm sure lots of, founder firms, especially, are just so busy building the firm. I think that is of interest. At what stage do you start looking at going, okay? Because what I'm hearing from you here is the first series of meetings sound like they were potentially a bit of a disaster. You were not ready, you
yeah.
didn't have the paperwork. So, it's kind of like that. When do you really to go, I guess, to market and say, hey, I'm going to start testing my product, to then be like, is there an element that some damage could be done if you go too early and your books aren't looking as strong as you hope they would be, say, in 2 years' time?
Yeah, it's a great question. In my experience, we didn't do ourselves any damage. That same firm that looked at us in 2016, I got them to a term sheet in 2020. So we didn't, because
Yeah,
we had turned it around and we were growing and I knew what they were interested in by that point. So I had a much better pitch.
yeah,
Yeah, so I don't think you can do too much damage. One way I think about it is sort of take what the market gives you.
yeah,
Um, so if people come in with inbound interest, I had this whole playbook. I wouldn't like follow up with them in the same way I would a sales lead. So if
sure.
they'd email me, I'd email them. If they didn't reply, I'd leave it alone.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't want to look like I really wanted to
Needed it.
sell
Yeah,
or like I was desperate to sell. So it was very strange actually to have this different mode because a lot of
yeah,
them would just go silent for a week or two. And it's like, well, that's kind of weird. And you kind of want to like say, hey, what's going on? But I would just leave it
yeah,
because we probably weren't going to sell anyway at that point. We weren't really ready. Yeah, so it was an interesting thing. But Probably almost every year, at least one big firm wanted to do a process. So I just
Yeah,
said, sure. I just did them all. I think
it's
in
good to go.
2019, I had both a French company and an Italian company. And we went all the way through for 6 months. Both of them gave us a term sheet, and we ended up saying no.
I think
But
that's like an interesting sort of point to start on. And I've heard similar things when I've been at roundtables talking about like startups and seed funding and that sort of thing. And I think when I have, for example, if someone has a copy with me and says, "Hey, I'm struggling of how to get my sales leader going in this consultancy, or what should I be focused on?" There's almost this reservation to get things right before you go out. Before I go
yeah.
out and get seed fund, before I go out and do this. A couple of things. One is you want to present really well, right? You think you should at least be on the right track. And the other thing is it does take a lot of time. Like you're talking about that took years or months, right? So you're
Oh,
all
yeah. It was a lot of time. But I think
yeah,
it's, I have a similar thing in sales that when I first learned, like when you lose, if you have built a good enough relationship, you just say, hey, why do we lose?
yeah,
And people tell you, if you build a good enough relationship, they'll be very honest with you. So I did a similar thing with
yeah,
this kind of process. And each time we did one, I learned two or three things that we were failing on.
yeah.
But nobody seemed to mind if you failed on them. If you came back a year or two later and say, hey, I listened to you, those three things are fixed now.
I agree. And I
People
think
were
then
open to
you know
that.
what the most important pieces are. And again, I heard that in a similar thing with people looking at funding rounds. It's sort of like you've built that relationship, they've seen the track you're on. They've also seen that you have, that it wasn't almost just luck that you got to this place, that you've really turned things around and that you've got a sort of a process.
I
So
think they actually like that on the investor
yeah,
side. They want to
yeah,
see that you hit some wall and
yeah,
then you like broke through it somehow. You figured it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. And I think that's like a nice point to start with. If you're thinking whether your firm's worth buying, that's the question that we're sort of throwing out there. First thing is, really think about going out and getting some market feedback, in
Yeah.
whatever process you can, to think about the metrics that you should be having laser focus in your executive team or on every Monday morning. And I guess that kind of segues us a little bit into this maturity model, which has come a bit from you obviously having a ton of experience in consulting firms and going through this process to understand what are the things that people actually looked at. I think, yep, cool. It's just been thrown up here on the screen. I hope everyone can see that. Mark and I have been working on this a bit. Obviously, at Projectworks, we work a lot with SME consultancies, and a lot of the time they're growing. That's really I get to work with and talk to customers every day where they're like, we were this size and now we're this size, and we need to think about what our next stage of growth is. And this is where it's kind of led us to this, right? Of thinking what are those levels and stages that companies go through.
Yeah. So we'd love to get everybody's feedback. This is pretty early and you'll see a couple styles. Mine is I just put the whole thing on one sheet and it's like all this stuff going on and you probably get a little overwhelmed looking at it. Dominique, I think, has done a great job and we'll show you in a minute a way to work your way into this a little bit, one step at a time. So we'd love feedback from people like which of
Yeah.
these are, easier or what's helping or not. But let me
Give
attempt
us the
to
lay of
just
the land.
give an
Give us the explanation.
overview.
Yeah, would be
Yeah,
great.
so first off, I think a lot of maturity models focus on operations,
Mm.
and as well they should. But I was reflecting on my time at Nexient and in the CEO seat, I spent well over half my time on the left-hand side of this, which
Yeah,
was if I could get more revenue, it would solve about 10 problems on the operations side.
yeah,
And getting more revenue was always the hardest part. And so that's where I focused my energy. So that's why we've broken this into the growth side and the operations side, just to begin with. Um, and then there's another layer here, which is it's kind of fascinating. I was doing SaaS software pretty early. And when I was at Bill.com, which was like 2007 to 2014, there wasn't really a set of accepted metrics. And I remember we went to try to get funding from Bessemer, which was one of the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley.
sure.
And they
Yeah,
were like, we came up with this white paper with this thing called SaaS metrics, and we're really excited about it. You should read it and then tell us what all your metrics are. And so anyway, so I went away and I did Nexient. So I was kind of out of the SaaS world for 9 years. And I came back, and now in the world of SaaS, there's a really well accepted set of metrics that everybody that is in
Yes.
this
True.
world
Yeah.
applies to their companies. And I feel like that has not happened for services companies. So I'd like to try to help, get to an agreed upon set that everybody in services companies thinks about and works on.
Yeah.
So the metrics are on the right side of each of these eight boxes. So
So
things
your
like,
operating profit and your utilize it. Yeah, you're absolutely right because you can go online and most SaaS companies will know this is what your profit should be or your gross margin or your payback months, all these sorts of things. But it's harder to see that for a consultancy. It's harder to see
yeah,
sort of line in the sand.
yeah. So the ones that I think I saw that people who are looking to buy a firm always look at growth rate and operating profit or EBIT or EBITDA. Those are the two probably gold standard, and a lot of people will tell you you can, multiply your profit by a certain multiple depending on kind of what's going on in the market and which part of the market you're in, anywhere from maybe 5 or 6 on the low end to maybe
Yeah.
30 on the high end. And that's like the gold standard. Your company is worth that in almost any market. When the market gets a little bit frothy, sometimes people will just look at your revenue and your growth rate and not be as worried about your operating profit. And you might get a multiple of your revenue. Usually, if that's going to be the case, you're going to go down one level and look at gross margin. So the idea being your projects are running at a very healthy profitability rate, but you've chosen to spend a lot of money on sales and marketing. And so your overall firm isn't as profitable, but your gross margin is good. So another firm would look at that and say, well, we could stop spending so much on sales and marketing if we chose to, and this would be a really healthy business.
Yeah.
So there's sort of different layers to it. But those I think are at the highest level. But then as you get into diligence, they will ask you like literally hundreds of questions about your
Yeah.
revenue and where it comes from, how many clients do you have? What or is it concentrated? So if one client leaves, the whole thing falls apart,
Yeah.
or is it resilient? Do you cut across industries? Do you cut across geographies? Like there's all these things they'll dig into
Yeah.
to
Which is
evaluate.
you can see, and I think that's why, growth and operations is such a great way to look at it because you're absolutely right. Again, having been a sales leader and, so, heading up growth and consultancies, when times are good, it's sort of left alone and you can kind of dig into this operational side and get into operational excellence. You've got no time for that if your sales are low and there's like all hands on deck to make sure that left-hand side that your team is selling, it's repeatable growth. And I think, you know, the sort of peaks and troughs of consultancies, those are the metrics that you can really start to have some focus on. All of your eggs in one basket. Have you got two major clients that are holding most of your income, or are you getting repeatable growth across your client base? I think those things you can see there on the left hand side is what you would plan around that and around some pipeline growth.
Yeah, and then just one other thing going on here, we put these numerical levels, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the idea being you may start at 1, and just as you're getting going as a firm, you're maybe just focused on level 1, a little bit of level 2. Ideally, you'd get to level 4, but I think the number of firms or the percentage of firms who get all the way to level 4 is quite low, to be
Mm.
honest. I think many firms struggle with that. When I first joined Nexient, Gartner had a report that said I had 10,000 competitors. And when we hit 1,000 people in our company, they told us we were in the top 175. And I feel like somewhere around that is where we got to level 3 and level 4.
Yeah.
So it's you know, a percent or two maybe that are really firing on all of these
Yes.
and continuing to. I think the other thing is you can get them going, but then you got to keep investing so
Yeah.
that you don't, it's almost like anything else where you have to keep practicing or your skills and your operations excellence goes away.
Yeah. And I think when we've been working through this, we kind of start using the word foundation a lot. Like I think there's lots of companies that we speak to who are doing little bits of these. They might have a real focus on, they really want to look at, resource management, or, really want to get across the utilization. But if you don't have that foundation of having really strong, adherence with people putting in their timesheets, like sometimes the really boring stuff, if you've worked in consultancies that get really hard,
Yep.
but you've got to get that. And yes, so great. Next slide here. And for those of you who are listening, we will share these slides across so that you can have a look at these as well. But consultancy firm maturity model, again, we're sort of looking at these 4 levels. And the idea is, although nothing is a straightforward path, as we all know from running businesses, but the idea is, you kind of grow into this. So we're talking about like level 1, we've called foundation. So you're really automating the basics and getting the fundamentals working. So here is sort of potentially, this could even be, if you really put full focus onto this, you were like, right, I'm going to take this maturity model on. This might be your first 3 months. You're really focusing on fundamentals across that. And then level 2, you're wanting to be deliver consistently at scale. Mark just said about like practicing, making sure that you're doing these things over and over again so that it's repeatable. We've related this maturity model to Projectworks. So for us, it would be, you'd be starting to use Projectworks to really truly run your business, as you're getting the fundamentals in, you're getting your timesheets, your rate cards, you can getting all these things in there that you can really start looking across your resourcing to truly run your business. And then in level 3, you're really starting to understand. So you've automated, and you've got the foundation, you've embedded this, and now you can get your hands on some insights. If you think back to going, right, now I've got a real view on what matters. I've been shopping around talking to people about what is most important into my business. I can now look at these insights and actually make some moves there because I know what they are and I can see them growing monthly. And you can actually drive some metrics. And then once you get to that level 4, which I think you're saying can sometimes be elusive, Mark, but that's, there's a lot of work to get to this space, as well as winning, pitching, and growing a business. This is when you can really scale. So, at this point, we hope you have a more optimized, data-driven use of a product, and you can use Projectworks to really drive your growth. Anything else you want to add to that, Mark? I know we
No, it's a great summary. Yeah. And I guess back to the beginning, we asked for the feedback. So I'd love to hear how people like to
Yes.
kind of digest this and dig into it.
Exactly right. And we've had a question on here from Jared. It says, in terms of moving through the maturity model, is it a case of measure and you improve, or are there specific strategies that win at each level? Which is a great question, because I think that's what we're hoping, you might see a bit of and we'll get some feedback on. We do think it is, the idea in a perfect world that you'd move through these levels. But again, that's not always the way. And I think Mark said the right thing. You might have a foundation really well done, and then 6 months down the track, you might have to run back and make sure that your team are keeping up with that again to make sure that you can keep those measures in place.
Absolutely. And I think it's also, you may have different folks in your team working on operations versus the growth side. So
Yeah.
they may progress at different, you may be level 2 on growth and level 1 on operations, or, they don't always match.
Yeah. And as we also know in consultancies, everything's going along, and then, in a great world, you win an amazing new client that asks you to operate in a different way, right? They want things done slightly differently. They want their invoices done slightly differently. They want their team on site, and that can kind of shake up your model a bit. But I think with this, having your eyes on the prize of the key metrics and things, and that should make those sort of opportunities easier to grab and run with. So this first piece in the maturity model, this is level 1. This is all about automating the basics. This is getting your house in order. This is getting your timesheets, your expenses, invoices, looking at how you really streamline your proposals, making sure that your templates are all together, the foundations of your business, really. And I think some things that we talk about when I talk to customers who are using Projectworks, I would say things like your team are independent in the day-to-day usage. And this is even things like timesheets. Your teams are entering their timesheets. They know your project managers know how to go in and independently check those and raise invoices and write off time. These small things that can become actually quite an operational burden and take you away from some of the bigger stuff should be working seamlessly, if you're right. And I know that's not always an easy thing to do, Mark. Out of all the hopes and dreams you have building a consultancy firm, sometimes it's the little things that can trip you up. I imagine you've had
Absolutely.
experiences of that.
Yes, so many little things.
Yeah. And I was talking to a customer a little while ago that was so core to them. They wanted to know their utilization. That was like a big piece for them, that they actually put an incentive in for their team for completing timesheets. I think it was like a 1% at the end of the year, and they had 99%, you know, adoption across that. So it had been really successful for them. They also made a joke that the only person that didn't get the small bonus at the end of the year was the person that said it would never work. So I think that's
Huh.
always, yeah, exactly. Always was someone in there, but that had made a big difference for them because it had meant that at the end of every month, they had all that data in there. So they were much quicker to know their markers, much quicker to know their metrics, much quicker as an exec team to be able to make some strong decisions.
Yeah, I used to actually lose monthly revenue because timesheets weren't done. So we would
Yeah.
close our books, and if the timesheets weren't done, it would move into basically work in progress that we did not recognize that month or that quarter. And used to drive me crazy. Toward the end, it was like about $1 million worth of revenue that would be rolling over each quarter or each month. And
Yeah.
if you're missing your numbers by a few hundred, few hundred thousand, it's pretty annoying
Pretty
to,
heartbreaking. Yeah. And it
yeah.
seems wild when you say that, like all this other amazing strategic stuff you're doing, and it's this one thing. So I think for that, we talk about getting the foundations there. We hope, I head up our customer team, and I love that because I believe we have a product that can help do that. But I also love helping and coaching customers on how to actually get that across the line, because you're also working with humans. It's not just software.
Yes.
So to make sure that your team are across that. But okay, so that's level one. Level one, we have the basics going, and we're surprised at all these amazing things that we've got suddenly metrics working, people putting data into our system. Level two is that practice thing you were talking about, Mark, the consistency. So we are consistently using the product and the software and getting our data into place. It's embedded in daily operations. So that might be things like this is the screen that you bring up on your Monday morning resourcing meetings. And this is how your project managers have independent authority to go into their projects and raise invoices and write off time and understand that sort of that responsibility has been dispersed within your organization so that your leaders can really hone in on that. And all core functions. And this is when you can really start to do some cool stuff. You can start looking at retrospective and forward-looking views of reporting, like you were just talking about, Mark. It would be great to be like, this is where I think, where we were sitting
Yeah.
last month. This is where we're up to. This is where I think I'm going to be sitting at the end of the month because I have that up-to-date data and can get into some things that will really, again, if you think about that maturity model going up, you can start coming into things like resource management, actually looking at where you believe your projects will end, not just where they're at today. You can start integrating a CRM, really looking at hiring plans. That's a big one, right? If you're aggressive in scaling, how do you know when to pull the trigger on those sorts of things?
Yeah,
Uh,
one of the things that I think changes your multiple and makes it bigger
yeah,
is if the buyer believes you've built a machine that isn't dependent upon a couple of heroes, right?
yeah,
So early on, as in level one, most firms have like some world-class experts. And if you're getting bought for those people. But what firms really are looking for is you've created a methodology or a playbook, and you can repeat it. And even if your very best person leaves the firm, the whole thing keeps going because you
yeah.
kind of built that knowledge. And so I think level two is the beginning of that. And maybe you're not all the way through it, but beginning to build that machine so that it's not just a couple of stars, but it's actually a team, a playbook, and it's very repeatable.
And I think that's easy to see, even from my point of view, in the sales world. You're a founder-led business, you hire a rock star salesperson and they start going out and selling and winning deals. And you're like, great, we're growing. If that person and their relationships go, often you're starting from the ground up again, right? There's like this mystery on how they were out there. That's
Yeah.
very different to when you're a 50-person organization or even a 30-person organization and you have a really clear view on the customers that you're going after, how long it takes for you to win those customers, and you've got a full pipeline so you can see where the work's coming rather than just we won another deal. Really similar to this, like if you're running your firm across there, it should be repeatable. You're totally right. If you have one or two project managers who win lotto or move off to another great opportunity, the wheels should keep turning. You shouldn't have to start from scratch across how your customers are served or the functions you put within the software, within the business.
Yeah.
So great. Level two, you're cooking. You're ready to roll, which takes us, I think, to level three, which is essentially you've got your foundations, you're doing it all the time, your team are on board, you're using, Projectworks or your functions across your business. And this is when you should now have some really unique insights into what's going on in your business. It might even be the case of what you were talking about, Mark, when you're like, sure, this is what I'm doing in my business. And they're like, what's happening? What's happening over here? This should hopefully get across ahead of the game a little bit. This should be like, whoa, I never realized that we were leaving $1 million at the end of every, year, was it? And that had been
Yeah.
unaccounted for.
Well, and also when they get into, okay, you're growing, you've got all this revenue, let's understand the quality of your revenue. A lot of the questions will come around to which clients are driving the profit, which
Yeah.
projects. And, we meet a lot of firms at Projectworks that are working on spreadsheets, particularly for sort of resource planning and the financial aspects. And they really don't know which clients are profitable. And so there's all these things happening, like, oh, we just gave them two free people for a month just because they're such a great client. It's like, you know how long it takes now? Those two people have to work 3 more months probably, and you'll be back to zero on that investment, right? So that's okay if you have 40 other people working,
Yeah.
but if those two are half the team, yeah, it's probably not a profitable client. So really having this at your fingertips and being able to predict it is where you want to be. So you don't want it to be, oh, we closed our books for last month, and by the way, these things didn't go well. You want to know ahead of time so you can be
Yeah.
making adjustments.
Agree. I think that's a really interesting piece within Projectworks that shows you the forward-looking view. So you should be able to see if you have your resourcing in based on the time people have entered when they've been good and entered all their time, that you can see where the project, I can see where the project's going to land in 4 months. And when you have that sort of data, that is when you can, like, if you think about that, your page of the maturity model, where it's your operations and your growth, those are some decisions you can make. And it is often quite surprising when you check in with customers 6 months on. They're like, whoa, the projects and customers we thought were our, cream of the crop are actually not making us any money. And that's where we're putting all our resource into winning new business. Like our whole strategy is to win more business off these clients. And you still might get there if you put some work into operating them more efficiently, like you were talking about. Or maybe that gives you a really clear view. If you're going from 20 people to 80 people, this is the client base that is most profitable for you. So actually, those are the sorts of opportunities you should be chasing and growing to get to that stage.
Absolutely.
At level three, we've put that you can understand and control your project profitability. You should look at your resource costing, your margins. All of those metrics are measured in one place. This should mean that it's really easy. You should be opening a dashboard in the morning and being able to see where things are at. If you have board meetings or executive meetings, you should be able to have all of those reports ready to roll and just bring them up on the screen, which, no joke, can save a lot of time if you're working in spreadsheets to put those together for meetings. And it just means that you can spend most of your time actually working on the metrics and how to improve them and get to a place rather than working on getting those metrics together. I thought the brag sheets was a fun one that we spoke about, Mark. We've got on there that you said was really successful for you.
Yeah, this is something I learned from the team at Nexient. The idea is kind of simple version of it is when you meet a new prospect, you do all this work to say what a great company you are and how your work's going to be great. And then you get the project and you just drop into execution mode. This idea was at least every other week, go back into sales mode and just remind your buyer at the client in a very concise sheet, here's all the great stuff we did in the last 2 weeks, and here's where we're trying to get to, and here's how we've, gotten closer to that goal. If you do them really well, they will forward them up to their bosses. And quite often it would lead to us getting to meet more and more senior people at clients. But it was just this idea of winning the client is really the beginning, and you
Yeah.
need to continue to think about how do we convince them that we're adding value? How do we confirm that we're adding value? If you send a brag sheet and you say, this is amazing what we've done, and they say, no, it isn't, it's way better to hear that from them then than to learn
Yeah.
about that a month or two later.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it was a great, really drove a lot of great discussions with clients, and also quite often helped us win the next project, win the next piece of
Yeah.
work.
I love that. And I also think that as an example, when you have, if you have the project profitability at your fingertips, that is an easy thing to do. Like it's an
Yeah.
easy thing to do. You could do a break sheet. You could record a quick video on, there's loads of video software where you could just literally, hey, I can see this and this is what we did. This was the results. Like that would be an easy thing to put together when you've already got those foundations in place.
Yeah.
And then the magic level 4, once you get up, you're humming, you're across. You've got, essentially for us, we believe at level 4, when you think of all of this, our view is that project work should be really mission critical. This should be a foundational piece for your business because you've got all of your basics in there. You've got your foundations, you're automating at scale. You can really understand those metrics. And that's when you get to some of those sort of magic, potentially elusive metrics that can sometimes be hard to really get a strong, consistent, daily accurate view on, like your operating profit, your gross margin, and project margin. And again, not just someone finally got me all the information and I can tell you where we were at 3 days ago on the project, but where we have been and where we're going to be, so that you can really actually make some decisions across there. At that stage, you want sort of to be working for minimal manual workarounds. That's what you're hoping to do so that you can have more time to spend with clients or make some action on these metrics. What do you think at this level 4 is the hardest, Mark? What do you think is the thing that is hardest to get to?
There's so many things at this level. So one is probably that you really have to decentralize your firm at this level. So while you're maybe as the founder or the leader used to being involved in all the key decisions, you need to build a team that can operate without you. I think that
Yeah,
was one of the biggest challenges. Um, for us, a lot of it was really understanding our financial model and then aligning costs into the way we execute. So I'll give an example. For us, sales, ideally in our total financial model would be 4 or 4.5% of revenue.
right.
And so we had two roles that really influenced sales. We had people that would go out and hunt down new clients, so brand new clients for us, and then we had people who would manage the project and effectively farm and sell the next
Yeah,
project. And so we basically built a compensation plan where they could each get roughly 2% of the revenue they were managing. And we tuned it so that they had to deliver growth of, I believe it was 25% year on year to get to the 2%. And they had to deliver the right project margin of, it was originally like 37.5%. I think we may have bumped it closer to 40. So if they delivered those two things, we would pay them roughly 2% each of the
yeah,
revenue. And we didn't cap it because we didn't care. It like the more of that, the better, because our
sure.
model said like 4% to sales. And
Yeah,
we had it like dialed in that the more we sold, it would stay at 4%.
yeah,
And this part of our financial stack, if you will, always was tuned correctly.
yeah,
And so we try to do that with everything in our financial model and drive it all the way into the way we compensate people, the way our actual expenses would occur.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, that was a lot of work on each one. There's another one in here that might be worth just a quick explanation. I threw in LTV slash CAC or
yeah,
CAC, which is this idea of bringing something from the world of SaaS into. So this is a pretty common metric in the world of SaaS. I don't think a lot of services firms think about it. So lifetime value is the ideal thing is you look at the profitability of a customer or a client over their entire lifetime. So you sort of figure out what's the average number of months or years that you keep a client, and what's the contribution to your gross margin during that time. So if you can get a client, like for us at Nexient, we were trying to have clients forever. We wanted to be their partner
yeah,
and work as part of their team. So we would have many clients that would last 5 years, 8 years, and we might be able to add, gross margin for a really good client over of 1 million or a few million a year. So the lifetime value to us would be many, many millions, maybe tens of
yeah,
millions. So then you start looking at CAC as customer acquisition cost and trying to figure out how much do we spend to get a new customer. And it's not just what you spent on that one, but you have to add up all of your sales and marketing costs for the ones that you
Yeah.
didn't get as well, because it all kind of goes into the ones that you actually did get. Um, and so just looking at that ratio, you can kind of, you want there to be a 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 5 to 1 kind of ratio that when you spend marketing and sales dollars and bring on a new client, you get $3 or $4 or $5 back for all of that. And it really drives a healthy kind of operating profit for the firm.
Yeah,
So,
I like that. Yes, and it is that's a really good example of like an actual holistic view of what's going on there, rather than looking at an individual monthly sale.
yeah,
That's really
yeah,
looking across. And you can see that you've got LTV to CAC on that level 4, that
yeah,
there, and so I think that's a really good example of what a powerful metric to have your eyes on the prize of. I can imagine a very powerful metric to talk about when you're potentially looking to sell your firm. But there's a lot of foundations that need to get across there to be able
yes.
to do that in a really, not only to be able to see that, but be able to see that consistently without a lot of spreadsheet work manually. And then it's, of course, just a moment in time.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm calling it. I think we've got about 3 minutes to go, Mark. So across there, and we had a lot of chat across that. And I think something that I want to leave people who are online with is that we would love feedback. I think you said that at the beginning. This is something we're working with and talking with customers about. I think we're building together, and I think there can be some really, great feedback that would be able to come from people to see if we're on the right track, if this resonates with people.
Yeah, so one way I'd say reach out to me or to Dominique, and we'd love to set up time to chat with you about this and maybe begin to apply this model to your firm and just work through it together and get your feedback. That way would be one option, and also just straight feedback if you've got it. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, that would be awesome. For a little bit of a wrap up, we said at the beginning this is for leaders of firms who are looking to plan an exit. And from the poll that we did, it was sort of 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10. So that leads me to believe that everyone on this call has a pretty good runway. Like if that's what you want to be doing, you're not looking yesterday or 6 months. I think 3 to 5 years. You said it took 6 years
Yeah.
from where to go. So that's in a pretty healthy sort of range. I think at the beginning you spoke about how important it was to test early. So I think that's a really good piece of advice. Anything else that you want to leave the crew
Kind
to?
of same theme, but maybe a slightly different way to say it is this idea that just keep practicing, like
Yeah,
and selling your firm is yet another skill. It's a skill that I did not have. Like, and most people, you're probably good at, the engineering or the design or the architecture, whatever it is you're working on.
yeah,
You maybe were never trained on how to sell a firm. I certainly wasn't. So just practice and
yeah,
try things and learn from it and give yourself time. It doesn't come together in 6 months or a year. Like think long term. So 3 to 5, I love seeing that everybody's got those longer horizons because you have time to work through it.
yeah. Okay, I love that. I'm going to leave it there. I think that's a fabulous piece of closing advice. Thanks everybody for jumping online. First podcast of the year, Mark.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Glad that you've joined me as a co-host, and we're gonna have a lot of fun this season.
Yes.
We'll be back in 2 weeks.
Yes, we will. Make sure if you like what you heard, you subscribe. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. You're right, we'll be back in 2 weeks. See you in episode 2.